From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Methane gas from a lake in Rwanda may soon become a major source of energy. Millions of people in that African country could use the electricity. The Rwandan government and an American company signed a power agreement in August at the U.S.-Africa Summit in Washington, D.C. The company is Symbian Power. The deal will provide electricity and lower the risk of an environmental disaster at Rwanda's Lake Kivu. 3 lakes in Africa have such high levels of carbon dioxide and methane gas that they are at risk of exploding. 2 of them in Cameroon exploded in the 1980s. In one explosion, the release of carbon dioxide killed more than 1,700 people. An eruption at Lake Kivu could cause even more deaths. More than 2 million people live near the lake, mostly in the cities of Goma and Gisenyi. Paul Hinks is the head of Symbian Power. His company has agreed to build a power station at Lake Kivu. Mr. Hinks says it is important that the methane be removed from the lake before a disaster happens. He says this is a time when a safety problem can be turned into something good, providing electricity. Some experts say the Mount Nyiragongo volcano near Goma creates a special risk. They say a volcanic explosion could cause the lake to erupt. Mount Nyiragongo has erupted several times in the past. Scientists agree that the methane levels must be lowered in Lake Kivu. But pumping processes can also lead to gas releases. Mr. Hinks says Symbian Power will work to remove the gas safely. He says the company already has experience working in difficult places. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. When we print something, a flat page comes to mind. For example, you might use a photocopier. Photocopiers print in 2 dimensions. Now imagine how this would work for 3 dimensions. A machine prints layers of material, usually plastic, one on top of the other. The layers are very thin, usually 1/5 or 1/10 of a millimeter. The layers then combine to form a solid object. There are many versions of this kind of technology, but the basic idea is the same for most 3D printers. The process is called additive fabrication. These 3D printers have become powerful tools for product designers. Computer-aided design programs use software to direct the printer. Designers can then create a solid model in a short time and easily make changes and tests. The 3D printing technology was first developed in the 1980s, but high cost put them out of the reach of many researchers and businesses. Early printers were limited. High cost and limited uses meant the 3D printer market was small. Now, lower cost printers are available to a much wider market, including small businesses, and individuals. In January, the global technology company Hewlett-Packard agreed to sell 3D printers manufactured by Stratasys. Stratasys has made 3D printers for years. Last year, it introduced a 3D printer for less than $15,000. More companies are using 3D printing to directly manufacture some products. For example, Freedom of Creation, based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, prints furniture and art. Bespoke Innovations in San Francisco, California, wants to design and print artificial limbs. Co-founder Scott Summit says these prosthetic limbs can be designed exactly for a patient's body for less money than existing products. But 3D printing still has limits. For example, metals are more difficult to print than plastics. However, airplane maker Boeing prints some airplane parts. And printers are being used to create some rare parts for old machines. For people interested in new technology, a New York-based company, MakerBot, sells kits to people who want to build a small 3D printer. Some kits cost less than $1,000. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For transcripts and MP3s, go to voaspecialenglish.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. American businesses are still slow to hire, and unemployment remains near 10%. But an economic research group reported in September that the recession in the United States ended in June of last year. It was the longest recession since the 1930s. James Stock is on the committee that dates the rises and falls of the business cycle for the National Bureau of Economic Research. The Harvard University professor says this recession was in some ways a lot like others since World War II. But one difference was the length, 18 months. Many recessions since the 1940s lasted less than a year. Another difference was the severity. The economy shrank by more than 4%. About 8 million people lost their jobs. Professor Stock thinks job growth is likely to increase in the coming months based on current levels of productivity. He says, "I think that we are at a point right now where productivity has increased so much that for output to continue to grow, we will be seeing increases in hiring." Some economic signs have improved. Manufacturing, industrial production, and consumer spending have made small gains. But a Labor Department report shows that new claims for unemployment insurance rose unexpectedly. President Obama took questions at a meeting shown on CNBC television. One questioner wondered if today's young Americans still could hope for a good life. That young man wanted to know if the American dream is dead for him. President Obama answered, "Absolutely not. Look, we still have the best universities in the world. We've got the most dynamic private sector in the world. We've got the most productive workers in the world. There is not a country in the world that would not want to change places with us. But the economy could change the balance of power in Congress in the November elections. Critics say the president's economic stimulus programs have only put the country deeper in debt. Economists disagree about the extent to which the spending has helped. But many agree that the president's policies avoided a worse situation. In Washington, central bank policymakers said inflation remains low. In fact, they said it may be too low to support their aims for price and wage stability. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. Here are some of the top economic stories of 2010. The world continued to struggle with a slow recovery from the financial crisis 2 years earlier. Greece admitted to bigger than expected budget deficits. Investors punished Greece with much higher borrowing costs. The 16 countries that use the euro joined the International Monetary Fund in offering loans of about $140 billion in May. But Greece had to agree to deeply cut government spending. Some demonstrations against the measures turned violent, and debt problems extended beyond Greece. Ireland asked Euro area members and the IMF for help in November. Its rescue was even bigger, considering the size of the Irish economy. Euro area nations have set up a bailout fund of about $1 trillion. But the IMF worries that may not be enough. Portugal, Spain, and Italy could soon require emergency loans. And the euro has declined, making imports more costly for the area's struggling economies. China's exports of important industrial metals also made news in 2010. China temporarily cut off rare earth metals meant for Japan after a territorial dispute in September. China controls nearly all of the rare earth metals market. These metals are used in everything from smart bombs to batteries. China recently announced lower export limits for rare earths for 2011. In the United States, the central bank took steps to speed recovery. The Federal Reserve announced a plan to add $600 billion to the economy. The goal is to keep long-term interest rates low and make investment and hiring easier. Unemployment remained above 9% all last year. On Wall Street, a sudden drop in a big stock index shocked investors on May 6th. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped about 9% in less than an hour before mostly recovering. A 5-month federal investigation of the so-called flash crash suggested a single big trade may have been the cause. World Bank economist Hans Timmer says not all countries are reporting problems. He said the biggest story is the very strong performance of the emerging economies in Asia and Latin America. The so-called BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, were expected to report notable economic growth in 2010. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Once, stocks were traded through the open outcry system. Today, fast interconnected computers have mostly replaced the traders shouting prices on the floors of stock exchanges. Joe Saluzzi is a head of equity trading at Themis Trading in New Jersey. The equity market has changed. It's no longer what you see on TV. It's no longer guys with colored jackets running around the floor anymore. The equity market is a bunch of co-located computers strung together by a bunch of wires, everyone trying to race to zero. The speed of light is the goal. Computers can process stock trades in thousandths of a second. Andrew Haynes of Gain Capital is an online broker. A millisecond can mean millions of dollars to the success of your strategy. Having a 1, 2, 3 millisecond advantage over other traders may mean that you get into a trade at a preferable price. Andrew Haynes says an estimated 70% of all stock trades are high-frequency trades made with complex computer models. Stocks may be held for only seconds. But fast trades are also blamed for big moves in stock prices. On May 6, 2010, a leading measure of American stocks briefly fell about 9%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average then recovered much of those losses by the end of trading that day. The Securities and Exchange Commission ordered steps to prevent future flash crashes like that one. Joel Hasbrook of New York University says those steps are working. They're called circuit breakers, and basically what they mean is that when a stock has moved by a large amount in a short period of time, there's a trading halt. Joe Saluzzi of Themis Trading says the main problem with high-speed trading is an unbalanced market. The stock market used to be a predictor of the future economy. Now, I think the stock market is a backwards predictor. It's forecasting the next microsecond move. It's not forecasting the next 6 months because most of the volume is being dominated by guys who could care less what goes on in 6 months. So how could you think the price is being set correctly? But Joel Hasbrook says high-speed trading can reduce sharp rises or drops in stock prices. In normal circumstances, high-frequency traders act as market makers. That means they stand by passively waiting to buy or sell from whoever comes into the market needing to trade. In that capacity, they actually help stabilize the market. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. You probably have heard of comic book heroes like Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. But what about Tom, the motorcycle shop owner, Joe Knight, and Karen Berman? Tom, Joe, and Karen all appear in a comic book called Financial Intelligence. But Mr. Knight and Ms. Berman are real people. In 2006, they wrote a book called Financial Intelligence, a manager's guide to knowing what the numbers really mean. It was written for people who need to learn quickly about accounting. The book explains in simple ways, often complex methods of keeping financial information. It became a bestseller. In June, publisher Smarter Comics released a comic book that provides the same information in easy-to-understand picture form. The new book is a combination of a textbook and a graphic novel. It tells the story of Tom, a mechanic who must quickly learn how to direct the motorcycle repair shop his father founded. Tom has no experience with finance and is struggling with the business. Joe Knight and Karen Berman help him. Artist Dave Wachter made illustrations for the comic book. Franco Arda is the founder and head of Smarter Comics. He formerly worked as an investment banker. He started the company almost 3 years ago with his own money. He wanted to create educational comic books that increase understanding. Franco Arda notes that many people grew up with comics. He says pictures combined with written text can help people learn an idea much more quickly than just text alone. This explains the expression, "A picture says 1,000 words." Financial intelligence will help readers quickly understand many of the major areas of accounting. The new comic book is available in paperback. The website entrepreneur.com named Smarter Comics to its list of 100 brilliant companies of 2012. The company has created comic book versions of more than 10 other books. These include Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, and The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Later this year, Smarter Comics plans to release a comic book by rapper 50 Cent. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can read, listen, and learn English with more stories about business and other subjects at voaspecialenglish.com. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. On August 24th, Moody's Investors Service lowered its credit rating for Japanese government debt. The credit rating agency downgraded Japan one step from AA2 to AA3. Japan's finance minister said trust in the economy will not be shaken by the action. Moody's says it acted because of Japan's large budget deficits and buildup in government debt since the 2009 global recession. Japan's public debt is twice the size of its economy. Japan has the world's third largest economy. Moody's said another reason was Japan's political situation. Japan has had a series of prime ministers since 2006. Japan struggled more than many other countries after the worldwide financial crisis. Japan said its economy shrank at an annual rate of 1.3% from April through June. It was the third quarter of shrinkage in a row. The earthquake and tsunami in March hurt manufacturing. Shortages of parts led to a big drop in sales and profit for Toyota, the world's top-selling car maker. Yet, the report on the economy was good news. Economists had expected a bigger decrease following the disasters and the nuclear crisis that followed. But there is concern that a rise in the yen could hurt growth. A high exchange value makes Japanese exports costlier and less competitive. Hours after Moody's action, Japan announced a program of $100 billion in loans to support business spending. The goal is to help weaken the yen and lift economic growth. Bond traders said Moody's downgrade of Japan was not a surprise. The action had the expected effect of raising borrowing costs for the Japanese government. Still, at about 1%, Japan enjoys the lowest borrowing costs of any major developed nation. On August 5th, another credit rating agency downgraded United States government debt for the first time. Standard & Poor's blamed the political fight over the nation's debt. Foreigners hold much of the public debt of the United States and some other countries. But 95% of Japan's debt securities are held by Japanese, mostly banks and retirement funds. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can learn English and stay informed every day from your computer or mobile device at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. On August 2nd, President Obama signed a bill raising the nation's borrowing limit. That debt deal, however, failed to keep stock markets from dropping on economic concerns about the United States and the world. The legislation followed months of arguing that only added to those concerns. Congress sent the bill to the president on the last day that the government said it had enough money to make all of its payments. The Budget Control Act of 2011 lets the government seek financing to pay its bills until 2013. Congress agreed to lift the debt ceiling by over $2 trillion, but also to make spending cuts. President Obama said, "This compromise guarantees more than $2 trillion in deficit reduction. It's an important first step to ensuring that as a nation we live within our means. Yet it also allows us to keep making key investments in things like education and research that lead to new jobs, and assures that we're not cutting too abruptly while the economy is still fragile." Richard Gordon formerly worked with the International Monetary Fund. He says there is a risk in cutting the federal budget too much when unemployment is high. If the federal government does not put money into the economy will stall, and that will result in another recession, and that cannot help anybody. The national debt is more than $14 trillion. At the end of last year, private investors in the United States held the largest share, 36% of that government debt. China was the single largest foreign holder of Treasury securities, followed by Japan and Britain. The Budget Control Act calls for almost $1 trillion in spending cuts over 10 years. A committee of 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans will have to identify another $1.5 trillion in deficit reductions. Congress has to get proposals by November 23rd and vote within a month. What happens if the committee cannot agree? Then an enforcement measure known as a trigger would go into effect. It would cut money from domestic and defense programs, but not in popular social programs for retirees and the poor. The budget deal contained no tax increases, but that issue has not gone away. Richard Gordon, now a law professor at Case Western University in Ohio, says the deal leaves a big question. What is going to be the economic policy of the federal government in the next 2 years? For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.